and he's willing to jump in and be a part of that first day. So I want to thank Justin so much for doing that. And also, a little bit of an excuse or a little bit of a grace on your part I'd appreciate. Since our name is Grace Fellowship, you probably have to exhibit it, even if you don't want to or not. But on my voice, I haven't got much voice, and some people are asking, do you have a cold? And I don't have a cold, I just have a championship. And the Mokina Burrows yesterday, Rick testified. It was of the size of a regular NFL Super Bowl to us. And both Rick Testa and I, as well as a couple of coaches and actually some guys from our church here, played yesterday and won our league Super Bowl. And so, long and short of it, I screamed a little bit more than normal. And so I've not got much voice, and so you're going to have to listen a little closer. I hope that that's okay. Well, we are working towards the tail end of this experience in the book of Exodus. And I, for one, once it makes its way done, just the first part of December is when we'll be done, I'm going to miss it a lot because I just feel like it's fresh. And even if it's 3,000 plus years old, these stories, I feel like they're very relevant because I feel them. I feel the pressures that Moses feels. I feel the pressures that we're going to find with the Israelites today. While the responses may not be simply something falling from the sky like we might see today, it may not be as simple as that. But I feel those pressures, and I feel it's very human, and I hope that you've been finding that too. And so today we're going to pick up in a story that you may very well be familiar with, the story of God providing manna and provision for His people. But I need to kind of give you an idea of what leads up to the manna, and that is complaint. These people they don't have the patience, even hours, just days maybe, from a gigantic divine act. They're very quick in their complaining. Their memory span is not very long. Everybody wants to turn your phone off now at the time. You want to do that? Thank you. But I wanted to share with you a little bit about maybe what's going on with that. Just people, why they give up so easily, so quickly. It's probably not a surprise to you. Standardized math tests. When they're given to Japanese children and American children, who do you know always does better in math between Japanese and American kids? The Japanese. It's probably not a surprise to you that's the case. Well, there was a study done recently by some researchers, and they wanted to find out what's going on that makes it Japanese students do so much better than American students. And they wanted to find out, is it maybe just that the Japanese, because of their culture, have a greater proclivity, an ability because of what they grow up in, to help them do better at math? Are they just better at math because that's the way they're built than Americans, for instance? So they did a test, a study involving first graders. And they gave them this puzzle that they had to solve. And the puzzle was very difficult. So in the long idea here, though, they were not interested necessarily that they ended up getting it right. What they wanted to find out with these students was that not could they solve the problem, but how soon did they give up or how long would they go in not figuring it out? It's just a really simple thing for a first grader. I don't know what the attention span today of a first grader is, but they gave this study, they did this test, and American students, American first graders, saw this puzzle, and they tried to solve it, and they gave a little over 9 minutes to the puzzle. And at that point, and without solving it, overwhelmingly they did not solve it, they just quit. They said, I can't figure it out. Japanese students went 14 minutes endeavoring to try and figure it out. Whether they figured it out or not was not the researcher's point. It was that Japanese children aren't just better at math. What it is that they are willing to go longer in figuring something out. They don't get as frustrated as American kids. They roughly go 40% longer trying to figure out a problem than American kids. So it really is an intelligent quotient kind of thing. What it is a character thing. And what we're going to find out today about why we, as a culture, give up so easily. Why we become so discouraged. Now, of course, it's not just Americans or American children. It's Japanese as well. It's even the Jews of the ancient world that we've been studying from 3,000 plus years ago that have this frustration and give up too quickly. They begin to complain, they begin to grumble, they begin to think something is against them, someone is against them, and that's why the troubles come. But it's something to note that we, as a culture, give up way too early. Way too quick on even the smallest things. Puzzles and math to the biggest things in life that involve God. And so what I'd ask is if you have a Bible today, If you don't have a Bible, you're going to need to get one. Actually, Rick, could you do me a favor, and maybe anybody who's on the connection team, could you get up and make sure you just get a handful of these Bibles, because I want you to have this Bible. We're going to work our way through a story that's a little more extended, and so I didn't put it up on the screen for you guys, but I want you to read this. And especially since my voice is weak, I don't want what the story is to get lost on you. So if you do not have a Bible in your lap, you need one. And you're welcome to go back and get one by hand in the back corner there. You're welcome to do that. No one's going to look at you funny for going to get it. But please go get that, because we're going to work through something that I think is pretty amazing. Yeah, giving up is a common human frailty. Hey, by the way, everybody, you can start bringing your Bibles to church. She has an idea as well. It's always good. We try to do the work a little bit for you and get it up on the screen, but I always think having your own Bible is important. So that's the one little sermon after today. I'll preach the sermon right now. There's a question about whether we're going to give up on stuff as it relates to God, which is pretty much everything in this life. If we get frustrated, we're giving up in some way on God being able to follow through us, in us, around us, by us, on stuff. Do we give up on God? Or do we trust Him all the way, even if it seems like there's very little hope in seeing it through? To go from quits and complaints to contentedness and a consistent kind of a faith. This is the difference between being immature and being mature. Quitting and complaining, being consistent and being content. This is the difference. So I don't know where you find yourself fitting in there. This is your job today, between you and God, to look and find who are you most like in this story. Exodus chapter 15 is where we are at today, and we're going to pick up in the middle of the story, verse 22. Again, this is an ongoing story. There's no one story independent of the other. They've been making their way from Egypt, out of slavery. Last week we talked about how God led them through the Great Sea, parts the waters, and they make their way through. This is fresh. Okay, it's just a little time ago. They just walked through gigantic walls of water that were standing up like walls. Okay, this just happened. Verse 22. It says, Moses led the people of Israel away from the Red Sea. They're moving on. And they moved out into the desert of Shur. They traveled in this desert for 3 days without finding any water. They had just had it standing up on end a few days before, but now they can't find it because they're in the middle of the desert. When they came to the oasis of Marah, the water there was too bitter to drink. So they called the place Marah, which means bitter. Then the people complained and turned against Moses. What are we going to drink? They demanded. So Moses cried out to the Lord for help. And the Lord showed him a piece of wood. And we're going to see another miracle act here. Moses threw the wood into the water, and this made the water good to drink. And it was there at Marah that the Lord set before them the following decree as a standard to test their faithfulness to him. Here's the decree, but the notion that there's a test of faithfulness is what the key point for us today is. There's a test of faithfulness, and here's what he says that is. If you will listen carefully to the voice of the Lord your God and do what is right in his sight, obeying his commands and keeping all his decrees, then I will not make you suffer any of the diseases that I happen to have just sent on the Egyptians just days ago. For I am the Lord who heals you. He doesn't cause pain in the punishment. He actually brings healing to you in the midst of difficulty. The truth about this life is this. God puts, probably more than this, but at least 2 tests that we're going to identify today. Puts 2 kinds of tests before each and every one of us. One, and it's even built into just asking you to have a Bible in your hands. Because it's not just something, it's not like the textbook for the day that we sort of observe as from a distance, like, well, that's an interesting fact or something, or an interesting idea. Whether we will focus upon and follow the truth of the Scriptures in everyday circumstances. Do we know the commands of God to follow them? This is really a critical thing. And before we try to get into anything else about, God help me, it's like, are we even in the wrong place to begin with? If we're following God's commands, we are in the right places to begin with. So our prayers change from, God, rescue me out of my own screw-up because I didn't follow what you said to do to begin with, to, God, these are circumstances that I know that you have something to say about. Please help me. So that first test is, do we know the commands of God, and do we do them in our everyday life? I don't have to probably tell you that the American church, maybe the North American church, maybe the global church for all that matter, is an illiterate, a biblically illiterate church. Not that they don't know how to read it, and not that they don't have it in hand. It's that we don't know because we don't get into it. This is the very first thing God says. Hey, you're not going to experience the kind of troubles that the Egyptians did if you just listen to what I say. That's how he describes it. So there's that kind of a test about, do we put the truth of the Bible into everyday life? And there's a second one, test during the complicated circumstances of life, the deserts, basically, east of Egypt, in their life and in ours. And these tests measure whether we'll be faithful and trusting when it is tough to do so. I would bet that there's maybe a minority of people here, but that minority of people matters to people themselves who are going through a very difficult time right now. It's physical, maybe it's relational, maybe it's emotional, maybe it's a career thing. You're like, I am struggling through this and it is killing me somehow inside. And it's these things that we're going to learn today that are certainly above food. We're going to read about food, but the truth of it is a principle that is for you today. And for those of you who are saying, well, I don't feel the pressure of desperation today, listen closely because you will at some point. Manna matters to all of us. And so these two tests that God is involved in, he's not just saying, oh, what a bummer, you got stuck in the desert and there's no water. Oh, I forgot about that. Usually deserts, oh no, they don't normally have water. The stink. Left them kind of out to dry. No, God isn't in that situation. He's taking them into places intentionally so that their reflex becomes, God, we are yours and you are ours. What do we do next? Because that is not their reflex up to this point. It's often not our own reflex. Chapter 16, verse 1. So they've been complaining and then God provides. Then the whole community of Israel, it says in verse 1 of chapter 16, the whole community of Israel set out from Elim and journeyed into the wilderness of Sin. Okay, this is not sin. It's spelled S-I-N, but it doesn't mean sin like we have in the Bible. It's just a name for that area. And so they're traveling into that wilderness between Elim and Mount Sinai. They arrived there on the 15th day of the second month. 1 month. 1 month after leaving the land of Egypt. It's not been long. There too, the whole community of Israel, what? Complained. But it's interesting here, they complained about Moses and Aaron. If only the Lord had killed us back in Egypt, they moaned, it says this. Here, and listen to this. There, we sat around pots filled with meat and ate all the bread we wanted. But now you have brought us to this wilderness to starve us all to death. Does anybody remember what every Hebrew's glamorous occupation was back in Egypt? They were slaves. They did not just sit around eating fondue all day long, with pots of the luxury. What are they doing here? It's interesting what discontent does when pressure is added. Pressure is natural. It's a part of life. Stress, it's a part of life. Okay, so if you're experiencing stress at home, at work, with your neighbor, on your team, in whatever relationship you may be, whatever you may be doing, stress is a natural part of everyday life. There's no other way to build muscle. And I get an amen on the coach back in the back of the room that does weights. There's no other way to build muscle than stress, than to pressure. It's a part of building us. It's an everyday part of life. But when discontent, when pressure is added to it, it distorts our perspectives. Pressures that cause us when we are discontented to exaggerate how bad our situation actually is. Man, this is terrible. And then give rose-tinted glasses view of the way things used to be. Back when we were in Egypt, yeah, we were slaves, but we ate like fondue every night. We dipped it in that boiling oil and it was wonderful, right? They begin to lie about what life is like back then. And then what often happens, they don't make the point here, but I think often happens with us, is that maybe we also inflate how things are going with somebody else. Why did they get that and I'm in this circumstance? Why am I in the wilderness and this person's in the blessings? And that's when discontented people have pressure added, they begin to tell untruths. To themselves and other people. They begin to become forgetful and frenzied. Look at verse 4. Then the Lord said to Moses, look, I'm going to rain down food from heaven for you. Wow, what a verse. I'm not joking. That would be great, wouldn't it? They happen more often than we realize. Here it's written in the Bible. But what a beautiful sentence. I'm going to rain down food from heaven for you. Each day the people can go out and pick up as much food as they need for that day. I will test them in this. Again, notice, I will test them in this. There is something even in the provision that has a built-in, a baked-in test. What manner of beast are you? What kind of cat are you? Are you going to be a person who is grateful and content, or a person who is greedy and discontent? I'm going to test them in this to see whether or not they will follow my instructions. On the 6th day, they will gather food, and when they prepare it, there will be twice as much as usual. Verse 6. So Moses and Aaron said to all the people of Israel, by evening you will realize it was the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt. In the morning you will see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your complaints, which are against him, not against us. It's a little footnote he's going to add 2 of here. Your complaint is against him, not us. It's not Moses and Aaron, it's God. If you want to talk something, talk to him. What have we done that you should complain about us? Then Moses added, the Lord will give you meat to eat in the evening, and bread to satisfy you in the morning, for he has heard all your complaints against him. He asks again, what have we done? Yes, your complaints are against the Lord, not against us. Those of you who don't listen enough, he repeats for them, it's not us, it's him. You have to deal with him. It's not us coming up with this stuff. He is disavowing himself of any wrongdoing here. Then Moses said to Aaron, announce this to the entire community of Israel. Present yourselves before the Lord, for he has heard your complaining. And as Aaron spoke to the whole community of Israel, they looked out towards the wilderness. There they could see the awesome glory of the Lord in the cloud. And the Lord said to Moses, I have heard the Israelites' complaints. Now tell them, in the evening you will have meat to eat. In the morning you will have all the bread you want. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God. A lot of repeating. I don't know if you guys just noticed, it sounded a lot like itself, like it had been folded over. Why? Because we are of a short attention span. We hardly ever listen. And with them, he says it to Moses twice, he says it to the people twice. He's folding over and saying, I know you didn't probably register this. That evening in verse 13, vast numbers of quail flew in and covered the camp. And the next morning, the area around the camp was also wet with dew. And when the dew evaporated, a flaky substance as fine as frost blanketed the ground. The Israelites were puzzled when they saw this. What is it? They asked each other. What is it? They had no idea what it was. It is this phrase that I think is the absolute coolest part of this story. What is it? This is the word that we see translated into manna. What is it? In Hebrew, the term mon, which we get this word in English, I guess, is the word manna, simply means, what is it? So since they had no word or science for this stuff, they just ended up calling the question that they asked when they first saw it. Oh, what is it now? And the next day, what is it? What are you going to have for breakfast? How about a bowl of what is it? How about do we have any leftover barbecue? What is it? I like that version, the way you make it, babe. Yeah, this is what they begin to call it. It's not called manna to them. It's an inside joke to them. They called it, what is it? Didn't have to call it oatmeal. Didn't call it a cookie or a toast or even bread. They call it, what is it? What in the heck is this thing? And where in the heck did it come from? It's kind of like a question that's a worshipful question, isn't it? I love their reflex. And in fact, whoever just said, what did you just say? I just said, what is it? Let's call it that! I love whoever that first person that said that is, because it was reflexive in that, where's this come from? What is this about? And where do they look? They look to the heavens. And they say, what's up with God? What the heck is going on? This is amazing. It's a question filled with worship. Such an apropos name for God's daily provision. 2 months ago at the Moreland House, we had a kind of a what is it? It was small, but it was big. A what is it sort of a moment. After June, this last summer when the church decided to no longer keep the property, and also, obviously, since we lived on the church property, the parsonage was going to go with that, and so we had to go finding a place to live. And so, there was a little bit of work in trying to discover that, but we ended up, God really, I think, made a fantastic provision for us. It was all the house we would ever need, and blessed in a lot of different ways because of it. God opened the door in that way. But since then, just being frank with you, we've been living on what we were living on before we had to pay rent. If you had to if you lived where you lived and they said, well, now you need to go pay rent as well, you got, well, how are we going to do that? That's going to be difficult. So we've been having to find rent money where there was none 6 months ago in our everyday living. And in a word, it's been tight. You can ask my wife for the greater definition of what she thinks tight means, and she'll give you a better description than I would. But is it a desert wilderness? Probably not. But it's been an extraordinary stretch the last few months. Well, the long and short of it is this. 2 months ago, it wasn't there. The math wasn't adding up. We were going to be short, and if you add too many short months together, you probably know there's people who like to talk to you on the phone and find out when are you going to pay for this, right? You probably had that person call at some point in your life. Now, I need you to hold on to what that situation is to add another part to this because I think that they're connected. And I share this with you so that, not in a way that we are trying to boast or brag, but just give you a situation where I think God blesses. Okay? So we're in a situation where we're coming short. And I need to tell you that this matters in my head, in my wife's head, that we happen to be people who tithe. And when I say tithe, I don't mean, it's not just a thesaurus word. I think a lot of people think this is a thesaurus word for charitable giving. Tithing is not a charitable word for giving or being generous. Tithing means literally 10%. We tithe 10% of the monies that we get from you as a church in a check form. We tithe it back into the kingdom of God where He's doing work here at Grace Fellowship Church. Every dime of that 10% comes back here into the ministry. And, the reason I say that is not as a brag point. The reason I say it as a human. Because when things become short, guess what looks really attractive? Okay, you know what I'm talking about, don't you? Yeah, there's something that looks really attractive, like, as a solution. Well, I am serving the Lord. He knows that. So He knows what my heart is. Okay, we begin to rationalize a principle, rationalizing changing the principles by which we are supposed to live. And I can tell you honestly, I was thinking about that. Because 10% looks really great when you're short. How will it work out if we don't, is the kind of question we probably ask ourselves. Well, 2 months ago, we knew that we were coming up short. And as the month was beginning to come to a close, we got a reimbursement check from our insurance company for not getting in a wreck and not getting pulled over. Basically, they write you back a check for 10% of being a big boy and a big girl. We didn't know that. We weren't thinking about it. We weren't budgeting it. We weren't planning on that. It's just as the month was getting ready to come short, this check comes in the mail. Guess what? It got us over the hump. It was daily bread. And it wasn't just the 10%. It was that God could lead us in a life where we could actually get reimbursed 10% because we weren't in a wreck. Living right, living the right places, going in the right ways. You see what I'm saying? There's something about God's provision that is more than just a money thing, although it is certainly a manna thing. You get what I'm getting at? Mm-hmm. Are you tracking with me? Because this is your story. Yes. It's mine, right? So I just want to make sure you understand that there are people who have what is it moments. God's well-timed sort of clear, what is this? Where the heck did this come from? Only God could have done that just to kind of surprise us, to catch us off guard, right? Figuratively speaking, the bread for each month comes each day. But what happens when we try to grab too much bread? Trying to grab for too much manna. Look at chapter 16, verse 15 as we start to turn the corner here. Moses told them, "It is the food that the Lord has given you to eat. These are the Lord's instructions. Each household should gather as much as it needs. Pick up 2 quarts for each person in your tent." Apparently that was enough. So the people of Israel did as they were told. Some gathered a lot, some only a little. But when they measured it out, everyone had, you say it out loud with me together, just enough. There's a lot of Bible in those 2 words. And those 2 words, before you move to the next word, you need to run it over your life right now. This is the part where God's got me and you in church today, is to say, have I run my life and my attitude, my spirit, my outlook, my view of the world, and how I feel about right here and right now? I need to run it through the filter of just enough. Because if I got a problem with God. Not with Moses or with Aaron. I've got a problem with God, me and him, and maybe he's saying, maybe you think you want more than just enough. Those who gathered a lot had nothing left over, and those who gathered only a little had enough. Each family had just what it needed. Then Moses told them, there's an extra part of this. Do not keep any of it until morning. But some of them didn't listen and kept some of it until morning. But by then it was full of maggots, and it had a terrible smell. There is something that God gives us that actually can turn into something ugly if we do it the wrong way. So Moses, it says, was very angry with them. After this, the people gathered the food morning by morning, each family according to its need. And as the sun became hot, the flakes they had not picked up melted and disappeared. In other words, manna from God in the hands of stingy or greedy people goes from, what is it? To, where is it? Where did it go? Or why does it taste so terrible? Trying to have more than we need means that what used to be God's good provisions become spoiled when they disappear. While it may be our priority, hear this, especially those of you who are really, really great with your numbers. While it may be our priority, it is not necessarily his priority for us to have enough for tomorrow. Because then we lose our passion for it for today. Now, I don't think this means this is a hand-to-mouth, day-to-day, paycheck-to-paycheck kind of living. It doesn't mean it's unorganized or sloppy, like that we could be really, really stupid and say, well, God, I blew it here on Sunday, but Monday, give me your manna. Okay, it's not saying, this is not an either-or situation, that it's an attitude sort of thing. He doesn't want us being so satisfied with our readiness for tomorrow that we forget that we're supposed to be with him and ready for him for today. This is what's going on with the manna. I guess one of the questions, and this is for you to process, this is not an indictment, but a reality check, is you probably wonder why in the Bible that the rich are the ones most highlighted in the scriptures as having the hardest time getting God. It isn't an intellectual problem. It's a will problem. There's a lot of phenomenal rich people in the Bible, by the way. There's a lot of phenomenal rich people in our world. They have the hardest time. And I think God's definition of rich and our definition of rich, we're like, well, that's them. No, you're rich. The poorest among us in this room are among the 8% richest in the world. We all have this problem. Daily manna was the primary example and the point of the prayer Jesus taught us to pray. Give us this day our daily bread. We may want a 1 week supply, a 1 month supply, a 1 year supply of God's provision, but God wants us on our knees every day. Something simple. He just wants that in us. He wants raw dependence. He knows that we need, listen to this, he knows that we need spiritual hunger to keep us alive as much as we need something to eat every day. It's the air we breathe. We need spiritual hunger like we need food. Stay alive. Last part of the passage here, verse 22. And here's where it kicks. It becomes harder. On the 6th day of the week, this is the day before the Sabbath, they gathered twice as much as usual, 4 quarts for each person instead of 2. Then all the leaders of the community came and asked Moses for an explanation. He told them, this is what the Lord commanded. Tomorrow will be a complete day of rest, a holy Sabbath day set apart for the Lord. So bake or boil as much as you want today, and set aside what is left for tomorrow. This is an important rule. Day 6, get twice as much as than you would have on day 5, because on day 7 you're going to pick up nothing, because nothing is going to be there. It's a Sabbath. It only happened in those first 6 days, but especially on that 6th day. So verse 24 points out, they put some aside until morning, just as Moses commanded. And in the morning, the leftover food was wholesome and good, without maggots or odor. There is the miracle. Most of us think it's in the manna. That's a pretty good miracle. But the real miracle is the thing that would have spoiled had they gathered too much on Friday, they'd have tried to consume it on Saturday, it would have been maggoty and horrible. But now they gather twice as much on Saturday, and when they wake up Sunday to eat it, it's still good. That's the miracle. Manna is never ever disconnected from Sabbath. A way of living Sabbath, a way of living manna, is a way of living like a Sabbath kind of person. We'll talk about that. Moses says, eat this food today, for today is a Sabbath day dedicated to the Lord. There will be no food on the ground today. You may gather the food for 6 days, but the seventh day is the Sabbath. There will be no food on the ground that day. Verse 27 points out that some of the people went out anyway. Have you guys noticed these people yet? They went out anyway on the seventh day, but they found no food. The Lord asked Moses, how long will these people refuse to obey my commands and instructions? This is a frustrating experience for God. Every time I say this, they don't do it. When I say don't do that, they do it. What's up with that? They must realize that the Sabbath is the Lord's gift to you. Here's the good news. This is not a God against something. This is a God for something. The Sabbath is God's gift to you, he says. That is why he gives you a 2-day supply on the 6th day. So there'll be enough for 2 days.